Hello, folks. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you're enjoying the story so far. This week we have chapters 11, 12, and 13. And David's still fighting with the hospital. And he starts to get a plan on how to deal with them. Hope you enjoy.
Chapter 11. Earl Manning, David's landlord, stopped by the next week to check on David. "I just thought I'd see if you were okay." "I'm doing fine. My leg is completely healed," David replied. "Have you found another job yet?" "Yeah, I'm working for this ranch up around Dolan Springs. They pay me in cash and don't report it to the government, so that damned hospital can't garnish my wages." "You know, you're not the first person to run afoul of that hospital. I've had some friends that had to file bankruptcy to get out from under them. A few even lost their houses to that place. It took me and my wife 10 years to pay off the bill for her having her appendix removed, and I thought I was going to lose some of my rental property before it was all over." "Something about that just doesn't seem right," David said. "I know what you mean. I tried to fight them, but they had an army of lawyers, and it was going to cost me more to fight them than to just pay them," the old man replied. An idea started to form in David's mind. "Could you make me a list of all the people you know that hospital scammed?" David asked. "Yeah, I guess there'd be no harm in that. What do you want it for?" "Just an idea I have," David replied. The old man took a scratch pad out of his back pocket, scribbled some names on one of the pages, then tore it out and handed it to David. "While you're here, let me give you some more rent money." "Now that's not why I stopped by." "I know, but here, this is another 3 months in advance." "Well, okay. That ranch must pay pretty well." "When you don't take taxes out, it adds up in a hurry." "Oh, by the way," the landlord commented, "you should see about getting that washing machine looked at. I think I heard a bearing going out as I walked up." "Oh, that thing's as old as the hills. When it finally dies, I'm going to buy a new one." The landlord thanked David and left. David went back in the garage and loaded more rocks into the crusher. By now he had the process down pat. While the crusher was working, he would run the water sluice and do the clean-out, then start the process over. He could work through 2 of the bags a day at this pace. At the end of the day, he would smelt the gold into bars and coins. The next day he would go back to the cave. The problem was, now that his leg was healed, he could dig faster and usually brought home 12 to 15 bags of stones. The bags were piling up, and David knew this could be a problem. But summer was running out, and soon lots of prospectors would be snooping around the desert. Toward the end of October, David started going to the desert every day. He also started running the loose dirt he was getting out of the cave through the dry washer. This dirt proved to also have a high gold content. He unearthed another large stone and nearly had a nervous breakdown before he got it home. Finally, he reached the end of the quartz. He had dug for 2 days and found nothing. David had extended the cave parallel to the wash, with only 6 inches of dirt separating the two. He took his pick and from the outside started breaking through this thin wall. After about 20 feet, the weight of the dirt on top became too much and the whole thing collapsed. To the casual onlooker, it would appear that the water had undercut the wall and that it had collapsed naturally. David went home and continued processing the rocks. He had run out of hiding places for the gold bars, so he partitioned off an area in the master closet and started stacking them in there. Unless you were searching for it, no one could tell the wall would fold out of the way, revealing the hiding place. Chapter 12. David started contacting the people on the list Earl had given him. Very few of the people would talk to him. David could tell that they had been so viciously harassed by the bill collectors that now they trusted no one. The ones that did talk said very little for fear of retaliation. David had almost given up when one Sunday afternoon he knocked on the door of one Stephen Rogers. An elderly gentleman opened the door. David introduced himself and told Stephen why he was there. David expected the door to be slammed in his face, as so many others had done. To David's surprise, the old man smiled. "Come in, young man." David walked into the living room and took a seat. "Can I get you something to drink?" "Anything that's cold would be great," David answered. "It is hot out there," Stephen said as he prepared 2 large glasses of ice water. "How can I help you?" Stephen said as he handed David the water and took a seat. "Well, like I said, I think this hospital is crooked, and I'm trying to collect evidence to support that." "What made you come to me?" Stephen asked. "Earl Manning gave me your name, sir." "Oh, yes. Earl is a good man. I've known him for a long time." "Do you mind telling me what the hospital did to you?" "I'll gladly tell you. Heck, I'll even testify on the witness stand, but I don't know what good it will do." David got out a pad and pencil to take notes with. Stephen began telling his story. He was 63 years old, and he had been the superintendent of the school district until he was diagnosed with prostate cancer. "First they told me that I just had an enlarged prostate, but not to worry because that was normal for a man my age. They gave me some pills to take. Then, 2 years later, they decided the pills were not doing any good. So they ran some tests. Funny thing was, they didn't tell me to stop taking the pills. They said the test showed cancer. They gave me the option of surgery or radiation treatment. I chose the radiation because I don't like being cut on. Before I started the treatments, they said they had to mark me so they could aim their machine. The technician comes in and starts jabbing me with a bunch of needles and injecting something under my skin. They said it was a marker dye. But look here." Stephen rolled up his shirt sleeves and revealed some tattoos on his forearms. "I got these when I was in the Army, and they didn't hurt near as bad or as long as that dye did. I don't know why a good permanent marker wouldn't have worked. Yeah, it would have washed off, but how hard is it to draw an X on someone's hip?" "What happened next?" David asked. "They started zapping me with their radiation. Now here's the kicker. This procedure took about 30 minutes from start to finish. The cost was $2,000 each time. I had one procedure a day, 5 days a week. I wasn't alone either. Every day there were people lined up to get zapped. Now you do the math. At 2 procedures an hour, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, at $2,000 a pop. Then get this, 2 weeks after they started zapping me, they said I should have been on a special diet from the start. I told them that they were too late because I had already figured out what I could and couldn't eat the hard way. Then, 4 weeks in, they say I should have been using some sort of radiation therapy cream." "What does that do?" David asked. "I don't have a clue, but it's expensive as hell. Here's a list of the medications they had me on." David looked at the list. There were 10 different drugs on the list. "The only one I know is the one they had me taking all those years that didn't work." "Why are you still taking that?" "That's what one of my doctors asked. I had 3, and I don't think they agreed or communicated with each other. But they all sent me a bill every week like clockwork." "Are you cured?" "They say I am, but I don't know, and I don't think they know. You know, the funny thing is, if I had accidentally been exposed to some radiation, the diagnosis would have been radiation poisoning, but since they were zapping me on purpose, they just called it side effects of the treatment. Whatever you call it, I can tell you it nearly kills you." "How much did it end up costing you?" "Well, I had to retire early because I could not work and take those treatments, so I took a cut in my pension. My insurance covered a lot of the cost, but my part of the bill was over $40,000. Did you pay them? No, I don't have that kind of money. Are they hounding you? Oh, Lord, yes. They would have taken my house, but I sold it to my daughter before all this started. I had heard how they did people, and I did my best to prepare for that. Did they do you wrong, young fella? Yes, they did. David told Stephen his story. When he finished, Stephen shook his head and said, I wish there was a way to stop them, but what can we do? Well, don't give up hope, David said. I'm working on a plan, and if everything works out, we might come out on top. What does your plan entail? It's better if you don't know. Well, thanks for your hospitality. Hopefully I will see you again. Come back any time. Chapter 13. One morning David called a good friend of his, Steve Maxfield. David and Steve had gone to high school together. Steve had gone on to college and became a lawyer. He now owned a successful law firm in Dallas, Texas. David told Steve the story of the hospital and how it just didn't seem legal. Well, partner, these things are very hard to prove in court. You have to show that they intended to scam you from the start, and therein lies the problem. Is there anything I can do? David asked. Short of having a confession, no. The odds are against you in court. But it sounds like you have your bases covered. They will quit harassing you in about 7 to 10 years. David had told Steve the story of working at the ranch. He had said nothing of the gold. I hope you're not going to send me a bill for this, David said jokingly. Steve laughed. David continued, While I got you on the phone, do you know any private investigators that you would recommend? As a matter of fact, I do. Let me find their cards. Here we go. The first is Paul West. He goes strictly by the book, but he can dig up dirt on anyone. The second is Don Strickland. He is more of a mercenary than a private investigator. I think he would do anything if the price was right. What do you use him for? David asked. Well, the law and justice don't always meet. When they don't, we sometimes call Dan. Remember, this is Texas. I see, David replied. I have gone after people like this in the past, but I never had enough evidence. If you dig up anything, give me a call. I will. Thanks, Steve. David called Paul West and set up a meeting the following week. David had suggested meeting at a casino in Las Vegas, mainly because the flights to Vegas were cheap and the rooms were inexpensive during the middle of the week. David walked into the casino's restaurant at the appointed time. Most of the tables were occupied by 2 or more people. One table toward the corner only had one man at it. David approached the table. Mr. West? Yes, and you must be Mr. Johnson. David sat down and asked, Have you ordered yet? No, I was waiting on you. Paul and David ordered lunch. While they were waiting, David explained what he wanted Paul to do. He gave him all the names his landlord had given him. This is going to take a lot of digging, which could get rather expensive, Paul said, eyeing David suspiciously. That's not a problem, if you consent to my one condition, David replied. What would that be? Paul asked, now more suspicious than before. That you allow me to pay you in gold. What the hell do you mean? Just what I said, David replied as he laid a 5-ounce coin-shaped piece of gold on the table and slid it toward Paul. Paul picked up the coin and looked at it carefully, feeling the weight in his hand. How do I know this is real? Well, take it with you and have it checked. Sell it if you want. Consider it a down payment, or you can keep it and hope the price of gold continues to go up. Today the price is $1,500 an ounce, so that makes it worth at least $5,000. I don't know how pure it is. It could be worth more. Also, I will not need any kind of receipt, So how you decide to report this income is strictly up to you. I'll have it checked, and if it's like you say, then we have a deal. Good. I'll expect a call from you tomorrow. Paul called David the next day and informed him that the gold had tested 93% pure, and the jeweler had set the value at $1,400 an ounce. Did you sell it? David asked. No, not yet. I have never had a piece of real gold, and I think I will hang on to it for a while, Paul replied. David smiled and thought, gold fever is contagious. I'll start looking into your case. It will probably take a couple of weeks, longer if the suspicion of corruption is true, and depending on how high up the ladder it goes. David continued to crush the rocks and smelt the gold into bars and coins. 3 weeks went by, and then he got a call from Paul. It's just like you said. The hospital jacks up their prices and performs unnecessary services to get the bill above any insurance company's limit. Their main targets are old people with a house and land or a lot of savings. And it doesn't stop there. Once they get the house and the property, they have their own real estate company sell it for them. Of course, the real estate company has a different name, but if you trace it back far enough, it's all part of the same conglomerate. They even pay off the local sheriff's office. If a bankruptcy judge decides to have an auction to sell off the property and too many people show up, the auction gets postponed. It's all airtight. They even have the state legislature in their pockets. Laws have been passed to make this all legal in this state. I see, David said. Sounds like a pretty hard row to hoe. It will take a lot to bring them down, Paul added. Can you email me a copy of your report and all the information you gathered? Consider it done. How much more do I owe you? A couple more of those chunks of gold should do the trick. I will overnight them to you. Thank you for your services. If you need anything in the future, don't hesitate to call me, Mr. Johnson. The next phase of this is going to get a little dirty, and you probably don't want to be involved. Okay, well, thanks again, Mr. Johnson. By the time David got off the phone, he had received Paul's email. David studied the information very carefully, looking for any kind of weakness. Finally, he found what he was looking for. It seemed that all of the head men got together once a year for a secret meeting at a resort near Flagstaff. This is where I'll get them, David thought. He had plenty of time before the meeting took place, and that was good, because he had a lot to do.